My name is Kayla Brennan, and I'm the Education Research Coordinator for the NACA office. Welcome to our webinar today. We're so excited to have you. Just a couple of housekeeping things before we get started today. Some of you are already familiar with our chat function. Just a quick note, if you aren't yet, it is defaulted to just send your chats to the panelists. Feel free to toggle that over to panelists and attendees so that everyone can see what you've got to say. We also have a Q&A function for you to submit questions throughout the webinar. It also lets you submit them anonymously if you would like. I believe at the end of each section of presentations today, there will be some time for Q&A, as well as some time at the very end of the webinar today. So let's go ahead and get things started, and I'll have the panelists introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matthew Vedder. I'm the director of the Alford Community Leadership and Involvement Center at Denison University, which is in the outer suburbs of Columbus, Ohio.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Brown. I'm a supervisor for Austin Community College's Office of Student Life. We are located in Austin, Texas, and 4 counties in the surrounding area.
All right, so at this time, we're going to go ahead and let Matthew get us started with his presentation.
All right, so today I'm going to be talking about soulful assessment, and what I mean by that is just a story that tells about what your data means, and really to emphasize the point that the story that you tell is as important as your data. So a couple things to note. This is coming a lot from my experience at Denison University, where I'm the director of our center. And it also comes from my role as a director. I've been in this role for about 2 years. Before that, was in the responsibility of doing more of the programming, working with the programming board, and that kind of thing. But what I want to emphasize is that regardless of where you're coming from, these are things that can be applied to your campus, to your position, to think more intentionally about how you're articulating what you do and why you do it. So whether you're a director or whether you're an entry-level professional, whether you're at a small school or a large school, take these as things of ways of thinking about how you can be more purposeful in telling your story and using data to do that. So I'm going to be running through a lot of information, but just to kind of give you some context, I'd like to talk about data and the story of your data as important, that it's relevant, that it's grounded in theory and research, that there's the what, the why, and the how behind your work, and that you use the context of theory, the research, the how, what, why to really ask the right questions for your assessment. And then finally, that you put that assessment practice to work. Assessment should be about driving and improving performance. So how do you build some accountability into that and drive performance through that? So the first thing is to really focus on mission. And most institutions have some set of core values or principles or pillars. At Denison, we use the first sentence of our mission statement very broadly. And really this sentence, to be autonomous thinkers, discerning moral agents, and active citizens of a democratic society, could probably be repeated by 90% of our student body and all of our faculty. And so that's become something as a campus we've pulled into our assessment practice. And not necessarily I can necessarily take credit for, but we've put this to practice in our outcomes wheel. And you can see those 3 pillars of our mission right there in our core student learning goals. And then we've tied each of these to some more specific core student learning outcomes. And so these more specific core learning outcomes are things that we can take in our offices and really see how we're fitting into the mission of our institution. And specifically for our office, really thinking about autonomous thinking and active citizenship as some really core principles. And this gives us the context to go a little bit more specific with that. So being relevant is about being tied to your mission. It's also about being grounded in theory. So our office incorporates the functional areas of leadership development, community service, fraternity and sorority life, and programming in student organizations. But across all of those areas, we've identified the social change model of leadership development as kind of one of our core grounding theories. And so using this as a framework for our work gives us some more context for how we might consider what we are doing as an office. I'm not going to give a thorough view of the social change model, but for those of you not familiar with it, it encompasses individual, group, and societal values that are exemplified by those 7 C's you'll see listed in those inner circles. The great thing about the social change model is that it comes with a lot of research on best practices that are applied to student activities. And so we are able to use this evidence to really also consider what we're doing, why we're doing it, to make sure it's relevant not only on our campus, but more broadly in higher education. And so having an awareness of how our theory can be applied and what those best practices are is really important to be relevant and to be able to tell a story that matters for those on your campus. So the next series of steps that our office took was to really have some conversations as a group about what it is, what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing our work. I mentioned we cover 4 different functional areas. So this was something that was really important to establish a shared vocabulary behind what we do. It's not enough to say that we do social change model. We need to be able to talk about how that relates to our on-the-ground work with students and the work of our office. And so we went about creating a kind of a shared vernacular of what it is that we do. Now, even if you're a one-person office, I think it's really important to have these concepts in mind because it helps distinguish who you are, not just between the other offices on campuses, but maybe your colleagues have only worked at large institutions or small institutions. They have a certain concept of what your office should be doing. This helps put some common sense language out there about what it is that we're trying to do as an office in words that make sense to both students and staff and faculty at the institution. We also wanted to be able to say specifically what we're doing in regards to our core grounded theories. So knowing that the social change model was the theory that is grounding our practice, we went ahead and looked at all of our programs. So we put them all in a giant document and made sure we had learning outcomes for each of those. And then we tied each of those to some of the values within the social change model. So this gives you an example of what a couple of those look like, 2 of our leadership development programs that we offer on our campus. And we've mapped those to the C's of the social change model, most prevalent in the curriculum for those programs. And then on the right, you can see all of our other programs, leadership development programs, that have also, some of those symbols represent the different C's, so that we can make sure we know with precision what we're doing and why we're doing it. On a division level, this is something we also have done, remembering that wheels outcome, that outcome wheel, and we've had some students take a look at their college experiences and map those to some of the outcomes associated, those core student learning goals. And so this gives us the tools to be able to articulate very precisely what we're doing it, why we're doing it, how we're going to go about doing this work.
Hi, I'm sorry, interjecting really quickly. Matthew, I don't think your screen is shared.
Oh, no. How is that? I thought I did that. Oh, shoot.
I just want to make sure people can see what you're
Well,
referring
then let me backtrack a little bit because, thank you for interjecting, because I think it asked me to verify some things. So let me go. All right. We're going to run through these real fast, everybody. This is the outcomes wheel that I mentioned, our mission statement, autonomous thinkers. We are social change model. This is some of the research about social change model and best practices done by the multi-institutional study of leadership. This is the shared vernacular that I was mentioning. These 6 principles were the terms that we use to talk about our office. And then this is what I was just talking about, some of our 2 leadership programs and how we've mapped those to the C's in the social change model. I will make sure that this is available afterwards so that you can come back and look at some of these resources. My apologies for that. Which brings us, and this is this outcomes wheel again. And so this shows us how a couple students have mapped their own personal experiences on the campus to all of their experiences. Okay, so let me go back to here. So now that we've, at this point, we've mapped all of our programs, we know which ones are tied most closely to the core student learning outcomes of our college, our mission statement, which ones tend to be best representative and best tied to the social change model of leadership development. And what we were able to observe through that process is that there were certain programs that we were offering, certain events, certain organizations that we advised that most embodied the work that we were trying to accomplish as an office. And so in looking at that, what we quickly realized was that what those programs had in common is that most of them were what we called immersive experiences, which means they tended to have be fairly time intensive, but have some really unique pedagogical elements that tied them together. And so we went about creating a pedagogy for what that might look like. And so we put together a list, those ones on the right, really being the core elements of what it meant to be an immersive experience. And this gave us the language and the tools to not just describe what we're doing, but also to take that and say, this is what we'd like to do. This also gives us the accountability to say, once we get to the assessment slides here in a second, of what, to know that we're actually measuring things that matter. They're not just random numbers or random events, but that we're articulating with some precision what we're trying to do as an office. So this brings us to asking the right questions. Now that we know what we're trying to do, we want to have more of these immersive experiences. We want students, we want to be able to ask the right assessment questions that will be able to make sure we can articulate our story as an office. Part of that is making sure that our questions are substantively measured. There's two basic principles in this. Direct measures are measures that directly assess knowledge. Things like tests you might take in a biology class is a direct measure. So you're directly assessing student learning. And direct measures are more of those kind of reflection statements, satisfaction inventories. Post-program surveys tend to be indirect measures. And so when we think about our work, what we want to be able to make sure we're doing is assessing, ideally mostly direct measures, but we can supplement that with indirect measures as well. But being able to sure we can say with more precision, this is what we know students are learning and accomplishing as a result of our programs. And this is not just best assessment practice. This is also something that's going to resonate a lot more with trustees, with faculty that are used to seeing these more objective measures of outcomes, and being able to provide that is a real strength to I think our assessment efforts. So asking the right questions also means being forward-looking. So demonstrating trends over time. And so we came up with a series of a criteria that we would track over time. Some of these are probably fairly familiar to some of your campuses, things like service hours completed, leadership positions. A couple of things to note about this, though, we did not tie ourselves to just our surveys. We used a lot of other national surveys that were assessed, that are used on our campus, like the NESE, like we have an alumni survey that's distributed, and just sometimes tracking things that happen within our office. But what's important to note about these numbers here is that we don't use these to track our success as an office. So this is not really part of a story of how we accomplish what we're trying to do. It's not the story of us fulfilling our mission. This is more of the story of what's happening on campus. It's almost more of the students' story than it is the story of our office, what the students are doing and how we're responding to that. It's helpful to have this information because it helps us make sure we're being responsive to the student body and the changes on campus and make sure that we're continuing to meet that need. But it's not how we necessarily articulate our success. With that, it's important to ask the right questions that are strategically aligned to who we say we are and who we want to be. And so drawing on all of that context of trying to develop and articulate who we are, what our mission is, what are the theories and best practices that guide our work, we settled on our core outcome that we wanted to assess is to what extent are our students developing an integrated identity that they're able to apply on campus and off campus through their involvements and activities. So we wanted to be able to show that CLIP prepares students to be active and engaged citizens that model personal integrity as they commit to lives of meaning and purpose. You might think, wow, that's great. How are we going to ever assess that? And again, once you ask the right question, then you need to come up with a way to assess that. And so we settled on a qualitative measure of assessment by using a rubric to assess what we're calling identity integration. So I'll flash that up here. This is the rubric that we developed. We use this to score student work samples. And so it will ask students, our senior students, to submit 1 to 2 page reflection statements that ask them to describe their involvements and how it reflects their values and their purpose right now in the next 5 years. And we have a couple different prompts that we use. And then we use that rubric then to evaluate them on to what extent we might measure their identity integration. We do this with the students that are most connected to our office. So as a small campus, we usually get about 30. We're hoping to closer to 40 or 50 work samples. These are judged by 2 people in our office for each work sample, and then we average those score and kind of collate those so we have a distribution of where our students are falling in developing this integrated identity. So this comes to the last step and that is making what we say we're going to do matter. And that's part of that is setting goals for ourselves and being able to articulate that we're doing what we say we're trying to do. So we know that about 75% of our students have in those work samples really do a fantastic job of articulating that integrated identity with a vision for creating community change. And so this goes beyond just some, yes, I can say that I learned a lot at this program. This is really them telling their personal story in this reflection statement and telling the story of how they're going to continue that work after college. And so we feel like this is a much more powerful story that we're able to share of how students are experiencing our work and using it to better themselves on campus and off campus. As I said before, we noticed that the programs that were most impactful in developing an integrated identity were our immersive experiences. And so we do still count numbers to some extent, in tracking the number of students that participate in these immersive experiences. And so this is also kind of one of those benchmarks that we use to assess our effectiveness with the goal to reach 40% of graduating seniors by 2023. And so we're able to track that number over time. We keep using the rosters of all those immersive experience programs to be able to look at those numbers. So that is the core of what we're trying to do. And what I want to emphasize here is that this is not something that happened overnight. This is something that has been a 2+ year process. We took little chunks over the time. We spent a lot of time over the summer developing these processes and these projects. And again, it's important that it was that way, because as long as assessment is just something that we do in May to get on our annual reports, it's never going to truly impact and improve the work that we do in student affairs. It's important that the work that we do is empirically verified as adding value to the student experience. And so to do that, we need to be a lot more intentional and a lot more story focused and thinking about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how we're doing it, so that it matters and so that it can improve the experiences of students. So as I switch back here, if there's anyone that has a couple questions, I'm happy to answer those if you just type them into the chat.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Matthew. Like you said, we will wait a couple of minutes for any questions about the Denison presentation before we move on to Austin Community College. So if you have questions, type those into the chat or the Q&A and we'll answer those. If you think of something later, we'll also have Q&A after Kelly's presentation. All right, so not seeing any questions coming in, so we will keep moving. So Kelly, I will leave it up. I believe it's your turn.
Yes, I am gonna share my screen right now. Let's see. Alrighty, hopefully everyone can see that.
Yes, we got it.
Right, wonderful. Okay, so again, my name is Kelly Brown. I'm a supervisor at Austin Community College. I just want to start by telling y'all a little bit about who we are. ACC is a public 2-year community college. We have 40,799 college credit students. This was as of fall 2018, so fairly large. We have 11 campuses across 4 counties here in Central Texas and over 100 programs in 10 areas of study. It's always a trick question. You know, people say, well, what's your largest campus? It is our distance learning. So our online programs are quite popular here. Additionally, we operate as one college. So we have that one college model. We all follow the same procedures. You know, we try and have unique uniformity, as our director likes to say. With student life, this past fall semester, we served 10,290 unique students. We count our students, you know, unique versus duplicate, how many students we've served, what the retention rate is, things like that. We have offices on all 11 campuses, and we have 14 student programming areas that range from intramural sports and recreation to leadership development, student organizations, and food pantry and resources. I have a bit.ly right there that y'all can feel free to copy, and it'll open up a copy of our 2017-2018 annual report for our office, and you'll be able to kind of follow along throughout the presentation with that report to see how we bring the data to life, because that's what I'm going to focus on today, is more so how we tell our story via our annual report. And it's not just something that, as Matthew said, we don't begin that just at the end of the year. We begin this process right as the school year begins. And thank you, Kayla, for sharing that in the chat. I appreciate it. So here we go. All right. There we go. So I know that we've all seen wonderful data reports that start off just like this, that look just like this. Has some pie graphs. Maybe if you're lucky, it's printed out in color for you. Some tables there with some percentages, information, all great information. But to be quite honest, it can be a snooze fest to look at. Many times we don't really care. We do care, but it's not telling us a story. It's just a set of numbers. So what do we do with information that we collect that's like this? It's important to know that the average GPA of students that we served was a 2.80 for the fall. It's important to know that 57.8% of the students that we serve are female, or that the average age is 25 years old. But how do we go ahead and tell that story? Well, for us, we go and we make sure that people understand our students. So I just wanted to share a little bit of a story about this young man right here. His name is Stephen Jared Valdez. He is an ACC student. He started out spring 2018, and he's an adult student. Came back after several struggles that he had in life. As you know, many of our students, they walk with incredible stories. Being at a community college, we get to see a ton of different types of students. It's actually really great. And he wasn't really sure what to do. Like many students here at ACC, he was completely overwhelmed by the admissions process, by going ahead and registering for classes. He just wasn't sure what to do. So he went ahead and he came to the Student Life office and he found out about different programs that we have. One program was the Male Leadership Program. And he came to us and he joined the program. And once he did, we saw him absolutely flourish. He is now one of 9 Riverbat ambassadors. Those are our student leaders who also serve as peer mentors on our campuses. He's the president of the Riverbat Golf Club. He has an exceptional GPA, and he just was awarded the Gilman Scholarship so that he'll be able to study abroad this summer in France. And so I love this quote that we got from him for our Male Leadership Program newsletter, where we asked him, how does he keep on track with his educational goals? And he states that he was nervous when he first came to ACC, but he quickly got involved with the Male Leadership Program. Having a support system with people that are like-minded and focused on school has been crucial to his success. Essentially, administrators are bombarded with dashboards that are brimming with analytics. They struggle with data-driven decision-making because they don't know the story behind the data. When data and stories are used together, they resonate with audiences on both an intellectual and emotional level. And that's what we aim to do with our reports every single year, is to make sure that we're getting that information out there to administrators that shows, the fruits of our labor, that our leadership development programming is working, that students are actually, there are real outcomes that are attached to this co-curricular learning is working. But we also want to make sure that we're pulling at those heartstrings as well, and telling the vast stories of our students, because that is a part of our responsibility. So, move forward. Oh boy. There we go. All right, data collection. So how do we collect data in student life? We do it through ID numbers. We have our primary collection methods, our ID card swipe. We utilize Campus Labs, which is an entire system that we have. It's called My Student Life, or MySL for short, where we submit event proposals, purchase requests, things of that nature. And we're able to swipe our attendance right into there. We also have a secondary backup, which is via Google Sheets, which is what I really utilize along with our student success analytics team when we go ahead and gather the data together. Some campuses still use the very old school method of paper sign-in sheets, which, is very old school, but we are trying to move away from that simply because we don't like to keep the paper sign-in sheets out. While an ID number isn't as sensitive information as a social security number, it's still private and anything can happen happen with those. All the ID numbers, as I said, are kept in Google Sheets. We also utilize our student feedback assessments and surveys. And we used to utilize SurveyMonkey for that, and now we've moved to use Google Forms with that. We also provide all of our student leaders that work for us, who we call Riverbat ambassadors and campus ambassadors. They do a student leader assessment as well. And much like what Matthew was talking about at Denison, it's very thorough in asking them about their experiences. And a part of it is also asking students to show what it was that they learned through working in our office. And that goes really all throughout their experiences as being student leaders. They are the people that work via our MySL system to go ahead and submit event proposals. So they learn start to finish how to put on programs, how to do peer-to-peer mentoring. Another way that we collect data that I don't have listed here is our student interaction form. That's something that our professional staff as well as our student staff are expected to fill out every time they have a meaningful interaction with the student, whether that is a referral that they do, or after they've had a peer mentoring session, or after one of our employees has had a mentoring session with the student. They go into this Google form, they provide the student's name, ID number, a little bit about what the conversation was. We have a drop-down menu as to what internal ACC resource they referred students out to. And so we have amazing partners on campus that work with us to disaggregate all this data and to help us make meaning of it. That's our student success analytics team. We utilize them greatly at the end of each semester, and then at the end of the academic year, we share all of our data that we have collected, and we work with them to help us craft our story. They're a little bit more hands-off, which I prefer because they give us the autonomy, to craft the story in the way that we need to. But their help is invaluable because they are data scientists, and that I am not. So I am very grateful for them. We work with our Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Accountability for our ACC Fact Book. What we like to do, since we do have 11 different campuses, we will use the information that is in the fact book to go ahead and say, okay, the campus population for, let's say, the Cypress Creek campus was 5,000 students. If we serve 3,000 unique students at that campus, well, we know that we're doing pretty well. What kind of students did we serve there? What's the demographic? What's the demographic that we're serving? So we utilize OIEA for that. We work with our learning labs, which are our tutoring centers, specifically with our male leadership program. A large part of that program is something called success planning. And so we make referrals to the tutoring centers on all the campuses. And essentially, we work with them monthly to see which one of our MLP members have actually gone and utilized the services. So we know, okay, hey, our referrals are working. They're actually going and seeking this out. We also work very closely with our Student Money Management Office. This office is still fairly new, about 2 to 3 years old, and they assist students with, you guessed it, money management, budgeting, scholarships, not quite as technical as financial aid, but it's still something that's very useful. They hire peer money mentors, and they did a large survey along with Trellis to figure out food insecurity amongst our students. And that really is what caused us to beef up our food pantry and resources program by utilizing the data that they collected in their Trellis survey. And we have food pantries and have had food pantries on every campus for quite some time, but they are now formalized. And we also partner with the Central Texas Food Bank to do a fresh food distribution at one of our campuses once a month. And so these data partners, without them, it would be way more difficult to do what we do and to share our story. And it took quite a long time for us to create relationships with departments like the Learning Lab and Student Money Management and Student Success Analytics to really make sure that it was going to be consistent assistance that we were receiving from them. And every year when we do reach out to them to form our annual report, they are extraordinarily helpful in doing that, because they also see that it feeds their purposes as well. All right. So I want to talk about something that I'm sure a lot of you know about, but it's more so of a corporate practice when it comes to marketing, which is first party, second party, and third party data. So taking advantage of all of these forms of data, because that way you can really determine how to most efficiently and effectively not only reach your students, but also tell your department story. So we have first party data, which is data you collect directly from your students. It includes data from behaviors, actions, or interests demonstrated from students that you interact with. That the tools that we use for that are our meaningful student interaction data form. It is our student leader assessment, our program surveys, that type of information. Also our incident reports, which normally really students don't fill out too many of them, but our staff do. Those incident reports have really helped us in terms of reverse program design, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Second party data examples, it's someone else's first party data. So for higher education, most times it's going to be institutional data. This is the information that we get from the Office of Institutional Effectiveness and Accountability. So it comes from another source other than your own and gives you access to information and insights you can't get from first party data alone. So we see the data of the students that we serve in our office, but what's the bigger picture? For example, here at ACC, we're a fairly, diverse institution, Hispanic serving institution, and we definitely see that within the Office of Student Life. While the vast majority of students at ACC, about I would say a little less than 18,000 are white students. In our office, we serve majority Hispanic students, and they make up about 15,000 of ACC's population. So we're able to go ahead and see the students that we're serving. Well, okay, then what types of programs do we need to do? What students do we need to reach out to? Who are we leaving behind? This is especially helpful when we take a look at our students who are quote unquote non-traditional, don't fit that 18 to 24 range, and who are parents and things of that nature. Are we serving them? What does the data tell us how we're serving them? And so we'll use the data, the institutional data, along with ours for that. Third-party data is data you receive from outside sources that are not the original collectors of the data. But what this data does is it helps you to gain more profound insights into behaviors and interests. It's especially powerful when you combine it with your first-party data. So examples of that would be like the Survey of Entering Student Engagement, or the CESI, the Community College Survey of Student Engagement. I never really thought of it in these terms, in terms of like when we're collecting data of first party, second party, third party. But when I learned these terms not too long ago, it made perfect sense. And I see how the corporate practice can fit into higher education. And so hopefully you can kind of see those bridges in your institutions as well, and where you can get these types of data. And while you're looking at the annual report, my hope is that you'll be able to see how we were able to utilize the first, second, and third party data within the report. Especially in the first few pages, you can see that. But namely in the section where we go over our food pantry and resources, you can see that we use data from one of our external community partners, auntbertha.com, to see where students, in what zip codes our students are doing the most searches for social services. So, who's needing housing, who's needing assistance with food, who's needing assistance with health insurance. This information has been extraordinarily beneficial for our Student Emergency Services Fund committee as well. So we're going to move it right along and talk about creating compelling narratives. It takes a village. So in our department, data collection is everyone's responsibility. No one is able to walk away without assisting with data collection. It is everyone's responsibility to ensure that on all 11 campuses, we are ethically and consistently and accurately collecting data. One great way to get everyone involved is to make sure that we avoid data elitism, which is any practice that makes data less inclusive. Every Student Life team member is actively involved in data collection and soon data analysis and presentation. Essentially, we want to arm all of our professional staff members with the tools necessary to be able to go anywhere, whether it's within ACC or outside of ACC, to be able to tell the story of our students and the story of our department and what we do and how we do it. So we've been working over the past year and a half to really make that a reality. Again, data science isn't everybody's thing, but making sure that we're breaking it down so that our data is digestible for everyone to be able to present is of the utmost importance for us, including our student leaders and our student workers. We send them in to classrooms to do classroom presentations to let our students know about the Office of Student Life, and they themselves utilize this data, of course, in very fun and engaging ways to talk to students about why they should stop by and get involved in co-curricular opportunities. We also create a shared data dictionary. Everyone in the department will have the same definition, the definition that we use for retention, persistence, engagement, interactions. Specifically, what is a meaningful interaction? How do I know that I need to document an interaction? What does meaningful mean for us? Views and impressions. So we work very closely together to make sure that we do that. And the leadership team within Student Life kind of leads that charge, where we'll have specific meetings to discuss data with our staff. And in telling that story and with everybody doing that all together, we want to ensure that any insight that you receive from data, that it explains 3 key things: what happened, why it's important, and how you can use it to turn it into something actionable. So I want to go back to Jared. So as I told y'all, he entered ACC spring 2018, became a member of the Male Leadership Program that same semester. He began monthly success planning meetings with an SL staff member. He has an exceptional GPA that he has been able to maintain. He was encouraged to apply for a student leader position, is now one of 9 Riverbat ambassadors, which is a peer mentor, one of 250 student organization officers, right? Okay, why is that important? Well, he's just one of 274 Male Leadership Program members, and their average GPA is a 2.92, which is higher than ACC's average GPA for general students. That GPA sits at about a 2.78, I believe. Last year, 70% of MLP members attended more than one Student Life event. So there's some engagement there with that success planning. We have a 67% overall retention rate with our members, and 90% of our members through our surveys have indicated that success planning is why they stay in the program. That's that one-on-one that they have with Student Life staff monthly to check in with them. So what are we going to do with all that? Well, that has led to us having a expansion with success planning and bringing in those Male Leadership Program mentors, our members, and our student leaders to become peer mentors, because that was something that we found a lot, and not only in our anecdotal conversations, but then in our surveys, that students really wanted. They wanted to speak to a peer who had already gone through this, who can provide them with some insight. So that's how we've expanded to make peer mentoring a large part of the Riverbat ambassador duties. We're blending 2 different programs for the upcoming fiscal year, taking the successes of the Riverbat ambassador program and the successes of the Male Leadership Program and melding it into one unique mentorship and leadership program, because the male part of male leadership is somewhat of a misnomer. The program started way back in 2006 and was specifically for minority males. However, we expanded that to be for first year males and now have expanded that to all students simply because the successes were great and we had quite a many female students say, I need something as well. I would like some help. And we never turned anyone away. So we felt changing it to mentorship and leadership was going to be much more inclusive. And we'll see our membership grow. And really this, with the success plan and the success of it, we learned, what we always knew, but we now know this for sure, that we need to focus on transformational, not transactional experiences. We'll leave that, the transactional experiences for other offices. We want, when students come in, for it to be a true transformational experience for them. So now we're going to shift a little bit to data that affects your work versus data that is evidence of your work. And I know I'm committing a cardinal sin here. Forgive me, y'all, with this PowerPoint slide here, because it has a lot of words, but they're all important, I promise you. I just wanted to point out, which I'm sure all of you already know, but it's important to note that data and evidence, they're not terms that can be used interchangeably. They do mean different things. Data is the factual information, such as those ID numbers that I tell you we collect, percentages, statistics, things like that. And evidence is data that is relevant and furnishes proof that supports the conclusion. So we know, hey, success planning is great. All right, where's that data that's going to help us, to bring that evidence, that hypothesis to light and prove that, yes, success planning is great. And here's the stats that show that. You want to make sure that your data meets these three criteria, that it's systematically collected, not anecdotal. So yes, across the 11 campuses, we have essentially trained our student population, our almost 50,000 student population, that when they come into a Student Life office, that they either swipe their ID card or they sign in with us for whatever service it is that they're coming to, whatever program it is that they are attending. That your data has been organized to aid its analysis and it's not still in raw form. So it's a good one. And that it's based on a valid and reliable assessment. And so there's two different types of evidence that I did want to talk about. And Matthew really did a great job of touching on these, so I won't go too in depth with it. But it's direct evidence, which is actual student work showing student knowledge and skills. And like Matthew had said, things like, a biology exam, that's something that's showing direct evidence. And indirect evidence is student or staff perceptions of student performance. Examples include surveys, exit interviews, focus groups, or a student self-assessment. So these types of evidence are meant to be combined to more fully understand a learning outcome. So hopefully that wasn't too boring and y'all stayed with me on that point with data and evidence. It's just something that I think is important to briefly go over. All right, reverse program design. So how many of y'all have been in a room where this situation occurs? Let's solve this problem by using the big data. None of us have the slightest idea what to do with, right? You see these numbers? Okay, yeah, that's not working. Cool, let's not do it anymore. Why isn't it working? Let's figure this out. So we use direct and indirect evidence, that's collected to determine our future programming. We create a criteria to assess our initiatives as well. But really a solid example that shows how we use our data and do reverse program design really is through our incident reports and through our meaningful interaction forms. What we had found there was that quite a few of our students were struggling with anxiety, and it wasn't something that was readily noticeable to us. It was happening via conversations that we were seeing, whether that was conversations in our lounges that our staff were having, or conversations that they were overhearing, or where a student came and expressed concern for someone else. And so we took a look at all of our incident reports for the past 2 years and realized, okay, anxiety does seem to be something that quite a bit of our students are dealing with. What are we going to do for that? And so we brought this to our student life specialists, and they have begun programming to do programs regarding anxiety, working with our district counselors, bringing them in, sharing that data with them, because they see these students, many of these students on a weekly basis. And so we've partnered with them to create these types of programs where students can feel like they're in a safe space where they can discuss that, having difficult conversations, things of that nature. Also, we do something called the Success Series, which is a leadership development workshop series that we have for our students. After 3 years of looking at the hard data, at the anecdotal data, we've decided that we're really going to change that program, because not only was the participation going down, a lot of our feedback was that, well, you're doing a lot of what the Education 1300 class, which is our intro to college course, you're doing a lot of what they're doing. So we feel that, oh, we're not going to attend because we get it here. We'll go to the ones that they don't touch on in the class. And so for fiscal year 20, what we're going to be doing is focusing on those items that the other course doesn't cover, and making it more so into a leadership conference that students will be able to attend instead of the workshop design series. So we're keeping the successful elements, but, pretty much dumping the ones that didn't work. And this was a 3-year review. We did not go with this decision lightly. We give ourselves normally 3 years to try an initiative, see how it goes, really review it thoroughly, and then see what we can and how we can move forward with that. Also, just not necessarily, reverse program design, but just program design in general. We create criteria to assess our initiatives. Is it student-centered? Is it sustainable? Does it avoid duplication of efforts? Important what I talked about with that EDUC 1300 class and our success series. There's a number of questions that we ask, which then, as you can see, goes into our annual report in terms of our goals and the goals that we set for ourselves as a department. We set those over the summer. And then utilize our data to prove whether or not we have actually hit those goals that we had. The entire office creates objectives and key results, just so that we can transparently align and prioritize our resources towards a common goal. We have quite a few staff. We have at least, I would say about 30 staff members that work for us. That's a lot of people to corral, and on different campuses. I'm not housed at every campus that I supervise. And so with that, creating these OKRs all together helps us to make sure that we all know the common goals that we're working towards and that we understand our part in it. And the objectives are the what, the key results are the how, and we just keep it moving forward so that at the end of the academic year, we can review those goals, say, okay, did we hit it? Do we need to keep this goal again? If so, for how long? Or do we need to switch up what it is that we're focusing on? And in a nutshell, that is how we do what we do. And do y'all have any questions? Because I feel like I was just yapping. So I'm ready for y'all.
While we're waiting for folks to jump in, I loved what you shared, Kelly, about the knowing the why, demonstrating evidence. And I think it's really cool that folks can see how that happens regardless of the institution type. It doesn't matter what your outcomes are. You can still be really intentional about making sure that you're providing that type of real evidence for what's being accomplished.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both so much for presenting today. We will hang out for a couple minutes to see if there are any questions coming in, but while we're waiting, I just again want to thank our panelists for taking some time today to talk to us about how they tell their story. And thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate it. This webinar was recorded, so we will be sending out the recording once it's available in Encore, our digital library, along with these slides from the presenters. So as soon as that's all ready, everyone who registered will get an email. So be on the lookout for that in the next week or so.
Just to kind of, I'll keep talking since we got the time. People are still here. I think back to when I was in graduate school, and our version of assessment was counting numbers. It's just a large public, great experience, but our assessment was program attendance. Program attendance is everything, and those numbers are useful to an extent. But one of the things that I hope this presentation has highlighted is that just having those numbers itself is not enough. The story behind those numbers is what's really important. And there's what we've each, I think Kelly and I have highlighted is different ways of approaching what you might use those numbers for. Our outcomes at Denison, we're a residential campus, so program attendance is not that important because students are here all the time anyways. But we do still use numbers in a different way to tell our story. And Kelly, who's one of her core outcomes is retention persistence, uses some of those numbers, but also looks at interaction numbers, which I think is really, really cool as well. And speaking of which, if we've been thinking about doing some of that, measuring interactions like you talked about, Kelly. People that are great at that, our career centers tend to do that really, really well.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And so that's, if you're looking for somebody on your campuses, everybody in the audience, talk to your career center about how they measure interactions. So that's or academic advising if you have a separate academic advising office.
Yeah. Ditto.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any questions coming in, and we can sit here talking for another couple minutes if we want to, but otherwise I will call it a day.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you all again so much, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah. Thank you all. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.